All right, let's dive right into this explainer because today we are going to completely flip how you think about AI in the workplace. I mean, we hear about artificial intelligence literally constantly, right? It is absolutely the buzzword of the decade. But today, we're cutting right through all that hype. We're going to look at the hard data, the deep research, and find out what actually happens when companies try to put this tech to use. So let's start with a pretty staggering reality check. 70%. Yep, according to researchers Bonnet and Westerman, 70% is the widely reported failure rate for digital transformation initiatives. Just think about that. 7 out of 10 times, companies pour absolute fortunes into new digital tools, and the whole initiative just flatlines. And why? Well, here's the kicker. It's almost never because the technology itself is broken. It fails because of weak diagnosis, poor change leadership, and some really intense cultural resistance. Which brings us to this totally foundational quote from Westerman and his colleagues. Technology alone is insufficient. You see, the single biggest myth in business right now is that AI is just another IT project. The honest truth? Buying the tech is the easy part. The actual heavy lifting is the organizational change. It's all about the people, the overarching strategy, and forcing entirely new ways of working. So to actually navigate this incredibly complex transition, we need a roadmap. Today, we're going to cover 5 critical steps: the digital transformation myth, data, decisions, and bias, governing the AI frontier, redesigning work for humans, and finally, reskilling the workforce. Okay, let's jump straight into section 1, the digital transformation myth. We have got to completely dismantle the idea that just plugging in a new piece of technology is going to drive real transformation. Historically, companies have operated in this IT project frame. Basically, you buy a point solution, you install it, and you're done. But the reality of AI requires what we call the organizational change frame. This demands deep strategy, intense culture work, serious ethical judgment, and a complete workflow redesign. Let's be clear. True digital transformation isn't just a software update. It is a fundamental shift in the entire operating model of a firm. Moving right along to section 2, data, decisions, and bias. Now, we really need to tackle a super dangerous misconception here. The belief that just because a decision pops out of a computer, it must be completely objective and neutral. And that brings us to algorithmic bias. This is basically defined as systematic unfairness in an algorithm's outputs. You see, data isn't some magical, neutral truth. It's a constructed artifact. It directly reflects human choices about what exactly to measure, who gets included, and how things are labeled. If you train a model on historical data that's full of human bias, well, that model isn't just going to replicate the bias, it's going to automate it and scale it up like wildfire. To make these abstract concepts a bit more visceral, let's look at a real-world example, the COMPAS algorithm. Now, this was a highly technically sophisticated tool used in the U.S. criminal justice system, and it was designed to predict recidivism, basically the likelihood of someone reoffending. But independent investigations showed it actually had differential error rates by race. It systematically overpredicted risk for certain groups while underpredicting it for others. This is the stark reality we have to face. Technical sophistication absolutely does not guarantee fairness. And, bias isn't just some simple coding typo that you can easily patch. It enters at multiple human touchpoints throughout the entire AI lifecycle. It happens right at the start when we frame the problem we're trying to solve. It creeps in during data collection if certain populations are left out. It enters during model design, and even at the very end in how human users actually interpret the final recommendation. Bias is fundamentally a deeply organizational and human issue, not just a math problem. All right, let's move to section 3, governing the AI frontier. So with all these profound risks we just talked about, how do organizations actually establish some guardrails? Well, before we even talk about AI ethics, let's just look at basic security. According to Verizon's 2023 Data Breach Investigations report, a massive 74% of cybersecurity breaches involve the human element. That means phishing, simple human error, or social engineering. So even if you have the most advanced AI security tools on the planet, the human factor is still your single largest source of risk. Technical controls are practically useless if they aren't paired with a strong culture of security and awareness. And you know what? That exact same logic applies directly to AI governance. We're seeing major regulatory shifts out there right now, like the EU AI Act and Privacy by Design frameworks. But inside your organization, this cannot just be a symbolic compliance checklist, what researchers call ethics washing. Genuine, responsible AI requires actual, real-deal accountability structures. Think executive sponsors and actual ethics boards. It requires lifecycle governance with tools that document a system's limitations. It demands independent bias auditing and, crucially, structured human oversight, where real people are firmly in the loop of these automated decisions. Okay, let's pivot a bit to the solution space with Section 4, Redesigning Work for Humans. So, if just dropping AI into an old process is a guaranteed recipe for failure, how do we actually make humans and AI work together effectively? The secret sauce here is complementarity. The goal is absolutely not to use AI as some cheap substitute for a human. Real competitive advantage comes from leveraging totally different cognitive strengths. Machines are incredibly good at pattern recognition across massive data sets, consistent execution, and rapid recall. But humans? We excel at contextual reasoning, empathy, creativity, and dealing with entirely novel situations that the AI has literally never seen before. If you want to see any real impact, you have to completely reimagine the workflow. And you do that using 4 specific moves. First up, decompose the work into individual tasks. Second, reallocate decision rights. You need to figure out exactly what the machine gets to decide versus what the human decides. Third, reskill your workers for these newly defined roles. And fourth, redesign your interfaces so humans actually have the agency to properly oversee and override the AI whenever it's necessary.
And finally, we arrive at Section 5, Reskilling the Workforce.
We absolutely have to talk about the human cost of this transition. 44%. The World Economic Forum projects that 44% of workers' core skills will be disrupted within just the next 5 years. Let that sink in for a second. This is not some slow, gradual shift. This is a massive, incredibly rapid transition that is going to affect hundreds of millions of people globally. Because of that massive scale, reskilling cannot be treated as an HR afterthought anymore. It is quite literally a strategic survival necessity. Effective reskilling requires targeted learning pathways, modular learning that actually happens in the flow of work, and genuine internal career mobility. But perhaps most importantly of all, we absolutely must provide psychological and social support. We have to recognize that for a lot of people, reskilling is identity work. Transitioning to a completely new way of working alongside an AI, that is psychologically taxing. Which brings us to this really important idea of a just transition, a concept originally framed by the International Labor Organization. This whole thing is fundamentally about procedural justice. Listen, workers are not going to invest their time and their energy into learning new AI skills if they don't trust their leaders. Period. They need a psychologically safe environment, they need a real voice in how their jobs are being redesigned, and they need to know for sure that this transition will be equitable and supportive, not just a sneaky pathway to making them redundant. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to chew on. Take a hard look at your own team or your own company right now and ask yourself honestly, are you just installing new technology, or are you truly ready to redesign your organization? Because as we've clearly seen today, the technology itself is really only the beginning of the story. The real transformation, the one that actually succeeds, is entirely human. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this fascinating research and keep questioning how we build a smarter, fairer workplace.